The bin in your closet is not going to save you. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you missed something obvious. Because the list you followed was written by people whose job is to survive a congressional hearing, not a 9-day power failure with no roads open and no ambulances running. There's a gap between what official preparedness guidance tells you and what actually keeps people functional when the situation doesn't resolve on schedule. I'm going to show you exactly what that gap looks like, where it comes from, and what it costs you if you don't close it. I've been doing this for 23 years, not as a hobby, as someone who's stress-tested every major system in my setup under real conditions. Not a backyard drill, not a YouTube range. I ran a full grid-down scenario during the 2021 Texas freeze. 9 days without power, roads iced over, no resupply. 2 years before that, a regional flooding event closed every road within 40 miles of my location for 14 days. I've had gear fail mid-scenario. I've had food calculations come up short on day 4. I've had to render aid to people with injuries that a standard first aid kit was not built to handle. Everything I'm telling you today comes from finding out what actually holds up when the situation doesn't reset when it's supposed to. Let's start with FEMA. Not to dismiss it. To take it seriously, the way you would any document handed to millions of people and treated as a survival guarantee. The official checklist recommends 1 gallon of water per person per day for 3 days, non-perishable food for 3 days, a battery-powered radio, a flashlight, a basic first aid kit, copies of personal documents, a whistle. It's a reasonable list. The problem isn't what's on it. The problem is the assumption underneath it that nobody at the agency bothered to write down. The assumption is that infrastructure partially survives, that within 72 hours, roads reopen, hospitals begin triaging, and emergency services restore contact. You only need 3 days of supplies because help is 3 days out. That assumption has been disproven publicly and completely more than once. Katrina, 2005. Puerto Rico after Maria, 2017. The Texas grid failure, 2021. In every one of those cases, the 72-hour window collapsed. The 3-day kit ran out before anything changed. When I was in Texas on day 3 of that freeze, there were no emergency services restoring contact. There were neighbors burning furniture in their yards to stay warm. The 72-hour window wasn't a runway to rescue. It was just day 3 of an ongoing situation with no visible endpoint. I don't plan around the assumption that help is coming. I plan around the assumption that it isn't. That's not pessimism. That's what 23 years of running these systems teaches you. You work backward from the worst realistic scenario, account for every failure mode, and build toward that. Everything beyond it is a bonus. Let me show you the 3 places that process exposes the biggest gaps. Gap 1 is medical capability. The first aid kit recommendation is where the official list becomes actively dangerous, not because it tells you to do something wrong, because what it recommends is so far below the threshold of what actually kills people in emergencies that following it precisely creates false confidence. A standard consumer first aid kit contains adhesive bandages, gauze pads, tape, antiseptic wipes, and gloves. It was designed for cuts and scrapes. It was designed for the gap between the injury and the ambulance. It assumes the ambulance is coming. Here's what actually kills people in the first 72 hours of a prolonged emergency. Not infection, not dehydration, uncontrolled hemorrhage, bleeding that continues because nobody in the room has the equipment to stop it, extremity wounds from lacerations, structural collapse, broken glass, vehicle accidents. Completely survivable with the right intervention. Fatal without it. I've seen both outcomes. The military established this through hard data. Tactical combat casualty care, developed in the 1990s and refined through 2 decades of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, identified preventable death from extremity hemorrhage as the leading correctable cause of battlefield mortality. Soldiers were dying from wounds that a tourniquet applied within 3 minutes would have stopped. That data eventually crossed into civilian medicine. In 2015, the White House launched the Stop the Bleed campaign, a direct acknowledgement that the consumer first aid kit was not designed to address the actual causes of preventable death. The training exists. The equipment exists. The scientific basis is documented. FEMA's checklist was never updated to include any of it. The 3 pieces of equipment I will not be without: a CAT tourniquet, an Israeli pressure bandage, and hemostatic gauze. The CAT tourniquet has been standard issue for U.S. soldiers since 2005. 3 ounces, self-applicable, one-handed, $30. The Israeli bandage is a pressure dressing. 1 person can apply to a severe wound without assistance. $8. Quick Clot hemostatic gauze accelerates clotting and is available without a prescription for under $30. Total investment for all 3 is under $70. None of them are on the FEMA list. The reason they're not on it is institutional risk aversion. Recommending a tourniquet implies recommending training. Recommending training creates liability for what happens if someone applies one incorrectly. The agency optimizes for what it can defend in a hearing, not for what saves lives in a parking lot on day 5 of an infrastructure failure. The result is a list designed to protect the institution that published it rather than the people who follow it. Get trained in Stop the Bleed. The course is free and runs about 2 hours. Then buy the equipment. That's the gap, and that's how you close it. Gap 2 is navigation. This one is almost invisible until the moment it isn't. Every navigation tool most people carry depends on infrastructure. Google Maps needs cell service, GPS apps need satellite lock, a charged battery, and a device that hasn't been drained by 3 days without power. Those aren't edge cases. They're the precise conditions produced by the scenarios that make navigation most urgent. I learned this the hard way during that flooding event. Day 6, I needed to find an alternate route around a washed-out section of road. My phone was at 11%. No cell signal. The GPS unit I was running had maybe 40 minutes of battery left. I had no paper map. That was a bad hour that could have been a much worse situation. I haven't been without laminated topo maps since. Land navigation using a baseplate compass and a 1 to 24,000 scaled topographic map is foundational military training. Not because it's traditional, because it works when nothing else does. A baseplate compass has no battery, no signal requirement, no firmware update cycle, and no service contract. It works at minus 40 degrees. It works submerged. A compass I bought in 2009 is still in my primary kit. Still accurate. I have never had it fail. A quality baseplate compass, the Sunto A10 and the Silva Ranger 2.0 are both solid, cost between $20 and $40. One-time purchase. Topographic maps are free. The USGS National Map Store covers the entire country at 1 to 24,000 scale. You can download, print, and laminate a full set covering your home area, your most likely evacuation corridors, and your destination for under $15 at a print shop. The map shows you terrain, elevation, water sources, road grades, trail intersections. No app delivers that without power. Not one. The reason land navigation doesn't appear in civilian preparedness culture is straightforward economics. A $40 compass and a free government map solve the navigation problem so completely that no company has a viable business model selling you more. The outdoor navigation market runs on GPS devices, premium apps, annual subscriptions, satellite communicators with monthly fees. A baseplate compass and a printed topo map make all of that optional. Nobody with a marketing budget has any reason to point you toward them. Now, you know where to look. Gap 3 is calories. This is the one that surprises people most, and it's the one I personally felt the most during the Texas event. FEMA recommends a 3-day food supply. What that actually means is enough calories to keep a sedentary adult alive at rest in stable shelter for 72 hours. That describes almost nothing about real emergency conditions. A person evacuating on foot, moving supplies, managing a household under sustained stress, or performing any physical labor burns between 3,500 and 5,000 calories per day. Sedentary resting expenditure is around 1,800 to 2,200. FEMA's guidance doesn't mention that distinction anywhere. The cumulative gap across 3 days of moderate exertion is between 5,000 and 8,000 calories per person. That is not a rounding error. That is the difference between someone who can make clear decisions and someone who can't. On day 4 of the Texas freeze, I tracked what was happening to my own cognition. Not dramatic. I wasn't hallucinating. Nothing critical failed. But decision latency was longer than I wanted it to be. I was slower to problem solve than I should have been. I traced it back and found I was running 600 to 800 calories short per day because I'd calculated for sedentary conditions and the actual conditions were not sedentary. That was a systems failure on my part. I corrected it, and I haven't made that mistake since. I now calculate food supply entirely by caloric density per ounce. Standard grocery store emergency food, canned goods, rice, pasta, runs about 100 to 120 calories per ounce. Mainstay 3,600 emergency ration bars produce 3,600 calories per sealed brick, weigh 1.6 pounds, and cost about $10. Roughly 2,250 calories per pound. For a 72-hour supply at active exertion levels, you need approximately 12,000 calories per adult. 2 mainstay bricks and a bag of mixed nuts covers that for under $30 and fits in a single layer of a pack. The equivalent in canned goods weighs 12 pounds, needs a can opener, and requires rotation every 2 years. The math isn't complicated. You just have to actually run it. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. A $30 tourniquet, a $40 compass, a free government map, laminated for $15, 2 $10 ration bricks. That is the entire gap between a kit that satisfies a checklist and a kit that actually accounts for how emergencies fail in the real world. Under $150 total. None of it is restricted. None of it requires specialized access. Every piece of it has been publicly available for years. This information wasn't hidden. The Tactical Combat Casualty Care data was published in 1996. USGS maps are government-funded and free. The caloric density math is multiplication. It wasn't included on the official list because the list was built to satisfy an institutional requirement, not to keep you functional on day 9 of an infrastructure failure. That's the honest answer. There's a word for what I've been describing, and it's not prepping. It's not survivalism. It's logistics. The science of ensuring that what you need is where you need it when you need it. The question is never what does the official list say. The question is, what does failure actually look like, and have I prepared for that specific scenario? Now, I want to hear from you. What did someone who's actually been through it, a veteran, a search and rescue volunteer, a person who lived through a real extended event, teach you that you won't find on any government checklist? Put it in the comments. Every answer builds a body of knowledge the official system never planned to create, and the more people contribute to it, the more useful it becomes to everyone in this community.